All right, and boom, we're live. This is the first podcast in 2 weeks. I hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. We did not do the podcast last week because it was Thanksgiving. So thank everybody for joining back. It's been a little bit of a way off, but we got a good show in store for today. Today is December 2nd. We are 2 days away from the fight night between Rob Font and Jose Aldo. Also on the card, you have Brad Riddell versus Rafael Fiziev and Jimmy Crute versus Jamal Hill. So it's actually a really good fight night in store in 2 days. Make sure you check that out. And then next week we have UFC 269, the last pay-per-view of 2021. That is between Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. And there's a shit ton of fights on that card that are going to be really good. Checking out the notes real quick. But before we do that, just got to mention that we will be going live for that pay-per-view. That will be December 11th, coming up in 9 days, so a week from this Saturday. We're going to be going live at 10 p.m. We're going to go all the way through the main event, so anywhere you're checking this out right now, you can find us on December 11th for the UFC 269 live stream, whether you're watching on our own YouTube, which is MMA Complete Podcast, whether you're watching on our Twitter at complete_MMA, whether you're checking out Fans Only Sports on any of their platforms, whether it be YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. Wherever you're watching this now, come check us out December 11th when we do UFC 269 live streams at 10 p.m., probably through about 1 a.m. We're going to get to UFC 269 very shortly because it's a crazy card and it kind of came out of nowhere. You know, we were hyping up the last three pay-per-views because they were outstanding. Personally, I thought UFC 268 was going to be the best pay-per-view of the year, to which I still think that it might be. 268 was a ridiculous card, obviously capped off by Usman defending his title against Colby Covington in one of the fights of the year, I thought. Kamaru Usman got actually taken into deep water versus Colby in a fight that a bunch of people, including myself, thought that might get stopped early. It looked early on in the fight that Usman was going to be able to knock out Colby in about the third round, and then for Colby to arguably take rounds 3 and 4 and then have a competitive round 5 made it a ridiculous fight. We also had Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler, which may be the fight of the year, and a whole bunch of other cards. And now Actually, before I get there, UFC 267 and 266 were both phenomenal pay-per-views as well, home to a couple other fight of the year candidates, most notably UFC 266's Volkanovski versus Ortega main event for the featherweight championship. That was, for me, the fight of the year. And if you want to know more about the superlatives, I've been calling it the best and the brightest of 2021, make sure you check out our podcast in 3 weeks' time. 3 weeks' time. I have it on the little board back here. December 23rd, we will be doing MMA Complete's second annual superlatives for 2021, where we're going to be talking about everything. We're going to talk about the best fights of the year, the best knockouts, best submissions, best fighter, best coach, best pay-per-view, best weight classes. We're going to be doing a complete hour of the superlatives of the UFC, so that should be a really fun card. I'm hoping some more of the boys will show up for that one. We haven't had a great podcast between a bunch of the guys, but, everybody's busy. It's the holiday season. That's what it is, but I think the superlatives are going to be really fun. And then the day before New Year's Eve, December 30th, is what I'm most excited about. That's when we revise our rankings for every division, and we're also going to be doing our pound-for-pound rankings for the year, which we didn't get into. But if you want to check out our original rankings, go check out MMA Complete Podcast YouTube page, where episodes 63, 64, and 67 were us going through every weight class of the male divisions and making our own rankings, somewhat based on the UFC's rankings, which you can go check out ufcrankings.com for theirs. But we made our own. We did it by, a couple different criteria, I guess you could say. Obviously, past wins and past records, including with who would beat who currently. We tried to stray away from media hype, like your your Conor McGregor's, your Sean O'Malley's, the guys that are just huge in the media hype that might get bumped up in the UFC rankings, we wouldn't bump them up for that reason. Even though we did have Conor McGregor higher than the UFC did, which is interesting. If you want to go check that out, lightweight rankings was in episode 64. Again, that's MMA Complete Podcast YouTube page, so go check that out. So that's kind of the basis of what we're going to get into today. I kind of meshed it all together. Once again, this weekend we got December 4th fight night between Jose Aldo and Rob Font with a good amount of undercard fights in there as well. Next week we have UFC 269, Dustin Poirier versus Charles Oliveira, co-main event for Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. First time we're going to see Amanda Nunes this year. And then, or second time, excuse me. She beat Megan Anderson. She'll be fighting Juliana Pena next. And December 18th, we have Chris Daukaus versus Derek Lewis. We also have Stephen Thompson versus Bilal Muhammad. So, usually the last couple of years we've seen UFC kind of cater off in the last couple weeks of the year, and they're not really doing that this year. They're going to give us big fights right up until the end of the year. The UFC does take a week off at the end of the year, or two or 3 weeks off right at the end of the year to give the fighters a break, let them go home for the holidays, all this and that. But right up until December 18th, the last card of the year, we're going to see some great fights. So make sure you stay tuned for the podcast. Make sure you stay tuned in the UFC because they're just putting out great content right now. If you want to find us, we do podcasts every Thursday night at 7 p.m. And all the places I've mentioned, MMA Complete Podcast YouTube page, at complete_MMA for our Twitter, which we've been getting a lot of views and a lot of progress for the Twitter. So thank you, everybody that's checked us out on Twitter. I think that's all I got for my, what is that, an epilogue? I don't know. That's just that kind of getting everything out of the way that I need to get out of the way. So stay tuned for episode 74 of MMA Complete Podcast. Austin, the co-host of the show, will be joining me very soon. And we're going to get into everything that I've mentioned and more. Once again, you're watching MMA Complete Podcast. Check us out on all our social medias, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. So, as I mentioned in my little beginning speech, coming up in 2 weeks, we have UFC 269, which is going to arguably be one of the better pay-per-views of the year. It's crazy the content that we've come out with, or the UFC's come out with in the last 2 months of the year. UFC 266 was a banger. Top to bottom was a great pay-per-view. UFC 267 was a little bit better in terms of like from the early prelims to the main card. There really wasn't a bad fight. We saw a title change. We saw a bunch of different shit in UFC 267. And most importantly, we won money here at MMA Complete Podcast with our sports betting. And then UFC 268, while we didn't earn as much money, we did earn some. but UFC 268 was the best pay-per-view of the lot. We had a crazy fight to start off the main card, Gagey Chandler. We had Usman versus Covington 2, which was one of the fight of the year. And it was just a ridiculous pay-per-view that carried excitement throughout the entire time and made us... We were never really in doubt that Usman was going to win, although there was times in round 4 that Colby had really rocked Usman to a point that we hadn't seen, besides maybe the one overhand that Burns landed against Usman earlier this year. But 268, I would say, not getting too ahead of myself, because we do have the Superlatives, the second annual MMA Complete Superlatives coming up in 3 weeks. But Colby versus Usman is one of the fights of the year. I would say it's top 5. Looking at my list now that I will not show because I'm waiting for that podcast, but it is in my top 5. And rightfully so. I really believe that. Because, I mean, is it top 5? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Whether that fight is top 5. But anyway, not getting too ahead of myself. UFC 269 plans to be just as good, if not better, than all of those other cards. So UFC 269, we have the main event, the lightweight championship between Charles Oliveira and Dustin Poirier. Charles Oliveira's first title defense versus Dustin Poirier, who arguably would have gotten a title shot if not for his trilogy with Conor McGregor this year. I mean, if you're Dustin Poirier, what do you want to do? Do you want to go for a title shot, or do you want to get paid tens of millions of dollars to fight Conor McGregor and win both times? So you can't knock him for that. Man's got to feed his family. Man's doing what he's doing. I get it. But now he has a shot to go for the title, which he hasn't been able to do since, I believe, 2018 when he lost to Khabib. So Poirier versus Oliveira is a fight I'm really looking forward to. Both of these fighters in the contention for fighter of the year as well, especially Dustin Poirier. So this fight's going to have huge implications for the superlatives at the end of the year. And then elsewhere in the card, we have Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena. Amanda Nunes looking for her second title defense of the year. The Lioness, the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time. We say this every time about Amanda Nunes' fight, but could this be her last fight? She's on something like a 12-fight win streak, and you never know with someone who is losing competition, someone who just became a new mom. How much more does she have in the tank? We know that she has enough in the tank to go for years and years based on her skill, but does she want to stay in this career path? Does she want to move to something less straining on her body so she can spend more time with her family? You never know. So every time Amanda Nunes fights, you got to be wary that this could be the last time we're seeing the greatest of all time. I say she's the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time. She has a very strong competition and a very strong claim to the greatest mixed martial artist of all time, no matter the gender. I believe when we did our all-time greats list, she was number 3. I think we had John Jones, Khabib, and then Amanda Nunes. Or maybe GSP was up there too. She was definitely top 4. And her legacy just gets better and better with every single win. Obviously, we saw 1-minute armbar of Megan Anderson at the beginning of the year. And it in such an impressive fashion, and yet every one of us were like, I can see it. I'm not too surprised. That's how great Amanda Nunes is. Fighting Juliana Pena, who is outstanding grappling. Amanda Nunes is well-rounded as it gets, but Amanda Nunes is definitely a better striker than grappler, I would say. So Juliana Pena proposes a pretty good problem for her on the ground as far as jiu-jitsu goes. However, I do fully see Amanda Nunes winning the fight. It's just a matter of how, and it's a matter of how much resistance can Juliana Pena put Amanda Nunes through. What is this? Huh. I just found some piece of trash on the ground. Also, UFC 269, we have a couple... Excuse me. We have a couple other pretty good fights, starting with the return of Cody Garbrandt versus Kai Kara-France in Cody Garbrandt's first flyweight fight. We had seen reports of Cody Garbrandt willing to step down at the end of 2020 to flyweight to fight the then champion Davison Figueiredo. However, Cody Garbrandt had a stint with COVID. He was unhealthy. He wasn't able to fight. And now that he is much healthier and he's had more time to train, it's going to be his first fight at flyweight. He's fighting Kai Kara-France. Kara-France recently had a pretty good win over Rogerio Bontorin. However, he is he's 2-2 in his last 4 fights, and he's fighting a fighter like Cody Garbrandt, who has some crazy knockout power. It's just a question of, has Cody Garbrandt been able to transition to flyweight? And if he has been, which I do believe that he has been, a fighter like Cody Garbrandt, who has some of the best camp help in the world at Team Alpha Male, being able to get the extra training for about a year to step into the new weight class, I do think that Cody Garbrandt will win that fight. As I just make notes right here of who I'm doing for the pod bet. Stay tuned. By the end of the pay-per-view, not the pay-per-view, by the end of this podcast, we will have a pod bet, which has been outstanding over the last 4 pay-per-views. We hit on UFC 266 pod bet. We were flawless in UFC 266, by the way. We picked every single fight right. UFC 267, we did hit our pod bet. And then we made an extra pod bet for UFC 267 and 268 combined. So that double pod bet hit. We did not hit for UFC 268's pod bet, but we had the 267 and 268 combined, so it made up for it. So we've been on 3 of the last 4 pod bets have hit. UFC 269 pod bet will be set in stone by next week's podcast, which will be next Thursday at 7 p.m. But hopefully by the end of this podcast tonight, we'll have a good understanding of what we want to do. Also in the UFC 269 main card, we have Jeff Neal versus Santiago Ponzinibbio in a top 15 welterweight bout. Jeff Neal, let me look at this real quick. It's amazing how much I can get off track and lose where I was going with each of these ideas. Jeff Neal lost his last 2 to Neil Magny and Stephen Thompson, both top 10 of their division. And Santiago Ponzinibbio, winner of 4 of his last 5. His only loss has come to Li Jingliang. So Ponzinibbio, on paper, looks like he should have the better chance against Jeff Neal. However, Jeff Neal has lost to 2 of the top 10 in the division, and then he also carries wins against Mike Perry, Nico Price, and Bilal Muhammad. Both of these guys have a lot of experience. However, I do believe that Jeff Neal's experience in bigger fights will help him against Ponzinibbio, and I do think that Jeff Neal will win. Going through each of these fights like this just makes me more sure of myself of all the picks I have. It's one of the main reasons this podcast has been so helpful with the sports betting. If you guys don't go through each of these picks like this, I hope that you at least take your time to really listen to this podcast because, like I said, we've been doing so well on the pod bets lately, and it's because we take the time to study it and really bounce ideas off each other. Finishing off the main card, Sean O'Malley returns again. Second fight of 2021. His first fight we saw was an utter madness between him and Chris Moutinho, where Sean O'Malley landed 230 shots, and more impressively, Chris Moutinho absorbed 230 shots. Shout out to Chris Moutinho, trains in Fall River, right across the street. Not really right across the street, but basically right across the street from us here in Tiverton, Rhode Island. Sean O'Malley is going to be fighting Raulian Paiva. Raulian Paiva making his first fight in bantamweight. Raulian Paiva, the normal flyweight fighter. And Paiva is coming off a very impressive win over Kyler Phillips, in which he won Fight of the Night honors in a fight night in, I believe, August. So Paiva also on a 3-fight win streak, O'Malley on a 2-fight win streak. Looking to make a splash in bantamweight. And O'Malley, who I believe this will be his last fight on his current contract. O'Malley has stated that in his current contract, he's going to get paid the same regardless of who he fights, so he's not going to fight great competition. He's going to wait for that next contract where he's going to get paid more to really stiffen up his competition, which I really can't blame him. You know, at the end of the day, he's 27. He's still training. He's still getting better. And if you can put more wins on your record before you get into those higher fights, you're getting more experience, you're just becoming better, and you're getting more ready for those higher competition fights. So this is a really intriguing fight. Sean O'Malley is going to come in with a 4-inch reach advantage, which I do think will be pretty significant, especially with these guys fighting at 135. I think the lower the weight, the higher the reach advantage is really going to do a lot for you. My gut tells me O'Malley's going to win this just because of his striking prowess, but Raulian Paiva, I do believe, will be much quicker. And I think with his added 10 pounds, he's going to be able to be more fresh and he's going to have a little bit more power. So I think this fight goes all 3 rounds, and I think it's standing the whole time. I think it's going to be a really good fight. It's a dark horse for fight of the night honors for UFC 269 for sure. I'm going to go ahead and say O'Malley, but Raulian Paiva has a lot to prove, and I think that he's gonna put a lot of people's eyes on him, which obviously is going to happen when he fights someone of the hype caliber of O'Malley. But nonetheless, I think that O'Malley will pick up the win, and Raulian Paiva he will look very good in defeat, or maybe he'll win. And either way, Raulian Paiva is going to be put on the map even more than he already is. Elsewhere on the card, that's the main card. It's going to be a really good main card, and then we have a bunch of ranked bouts in the undercard, but we got other places to be in this podcast, so I'm going to kind of fly through them real quick. We have Josh Emmett versus Dan Ige in a top 10 featherweight bout that's going on the prelims, which is crazy. Josh Emmett actually a pretty big favorite in this match as far as sportsbook odds. I have Josh Emmett, but the Dan Ige odds are very intriguing. Josh Emmett, winner of his last 3 of his last 5. He's on a 3-fight win streak. Dan Ige has lost 2 of his last 3, but they're to Chan Sung Jung and Calvin Kattar, top 5 of the division. Both fighters really, really talented. However, I think Josh Emmett pulls it out in the last-stitch decision victory. After that, we have Pedro Munoz versus Dominic Cruz in a fight of new school versus old school. Dominic Cruz trying to get back in the division after, I don't want to say falling off, but he definitely took some time and then came back to the UFC and was underwhelming. He's now fighting Pedro Munoz, who obviously lost to Jose Aldo earlier in the year. I think this is a very tightly contested fight. I also think it's going to be standing the whole time. I think that Pedro Munoz is going to put too much pressure on Dominic Cruz, and he's eventually going to turn out with the victory. However, it's going to be a really interesting fight, and it's going to be nostalgic. Anytime a great old school fighter like Dominic Cruz fights, it's always nostalgic for old school fans like myself. Augusto Sakai versus Tai Tuivasa is also on the undercard. I think Augusto Sakai is one of the best kickboxers in the heavyweight division right now, but Tai Tuivasa is really well-rounded, and he's really underrated in that division, and he's also on a 2 or 3 fight win streak. So I like Tai Tuivasa a lot, and I think Tai Tuivasa wins this fight, and he finally gets put back in the top 15 of the division where he deserves. Coming up next, we have Jordan Wright versus Bruno Silva in a fight that Jordan Wright, who's 12-1, his only loss came to Joaquin Buckley when Buckley was on a little bit of a tear right after getting knockout of the year last year. And since then, he beat Jamie Pickett. But Bruno Silva is the huge favorite in this fight, which is a little bit absurd to me. I like Bruno Silva, and he's 12-2 of his own. Bruno Silva, this fight should be even in my eyes. So I'm going to sprinkle some on Jordan Wright, but I don't want to come out and say that I think Jordan Wright will win money line, but I kind of do. It makes me think that I need to do more research into Bruno Silva. Either way, I like Jordan Wright because of his numbers. Andre Muniz versus Eric Anders. Andre Muniz is going to win. Andre Muniz recently tapped out, and he didn't even tap out. I think he broke the shoulder of Jacare Souza, and Jacare Souza is one of the greatest, not one of the greatest, but he's a very, very, very talented jiu-jitsu artist from the old school Brazilian training the UFC's ever seen. And Andre Muniz, who's only like 26, 27, was able to take him out in the first round. Andre Muniz is one of the top prospects in the middleweight division, and I think he runs through Eric Anders, and honestly, he might get a top 15 ranking after this fight as well. Miranda Maverick makes her return after a controversial decision loss in her last fight. I think Miranda Maverick runs through. I have her. What an asshole! I have her last name here, but I don't have her first name. Let me look that up before I make myself look even more. Erin Blanchfield. Erin Blanchfield is going to be fighting Miranda Maverick. I think Miranda Maverick wins this possibly by TKO. Miranda Maverick is one of my favorite prospects in the entire UFC, and I think that she will win her next couple fights on her way to being a top 10 fighter in the flyweight division. Future contender for Valentina Shevchenko? I believe so, but it will take some time. Next, we have Alex Perez versus Matt Schnell in a top 8 ranking fight of the UFC flyweight division, and I really think this is another dark horse for fight of the night. Matt Schnell, one of the quickest fighters in the UFC, and then Alex Perez, who is so well-rounded. I think that this fight's going to be hugely entertaining as long as both guys don't go at it so much in the first 2 rounds that they gas out in the third. I think Alex Perez will win, but Matt Schnell, another big underdog that I would sprinkle on as well. Here, MMA Complete, we like to sprinkle on the big odds, and Matt Schnell has a decent chance to win this because of his versatility, because of his well-roundedness, and because of his quickness. Matt Schnell might be even a little bit better striking, but Alex Perez is definitely better on the ground. And then to finish off the big fights for UFC 269, we have Derek Minner versus Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall, fresh off his disappointing loss to Ilia Topuria, who again is one of the best prospects in the UFC's featherweight division. And this one I'm going to keep short and sweet. I think Ryan Hall will be able to finish Derek Minner really quickly on the ground. Ryan Hall has one of the best wrestling and jiu-jitsu games, and not only best, but creative and what's the word? He's almost like a Tony Ferguson, where he's a weird guy. Not a weird guy, but he has a weird style. We saw him go for Imanari rolls against Topuria. We saw him go on the ground and hope that Topuria would get on top of him to initiate a ground game. And I think that Ryan Hall will be able to pull it off. I think he had a tough opponent against Ilia Topuria. If you didn't know, Topuria was a great prospect and future top 5 in the featherweight division, I believe. At such a young age of 23, you did after that Ryan Hall fight. But that doesn't discredit Ryan Hall. Ryan Hall has a really great ground game, and I think that he will be very good in the future. And that's UFC 269. UFC 269, like I opened up with this podcast, is going to be a barn burner. It's going to have great fights throughout the entire night. Unfortunately, we won't be able to start live reacting until about 10 p.m., but from about 6 p.m. on, I honestly believe that UFC 269, all the way through the main event, will have great fights, exciting fights, and if you bet the right way, could make you a lot of money because the fights are, I don't want to say one-sided because a lot of them, it is a very close matchup, but there are certain fights, especially fights that have weirdly outstretched odds, like a Jordan Wright Bruno Silva, that could win you a lot of money. And like I said, by the end of the podcast tonight, hopefully we will have a pod bet secured. But right now, before I talk with the other guys from the podcast, I like Amanda Nunes, I like Jeff Neal, I like Cody Garbrandt, I like Tai Tuivasa, Andre Muniz, and Miranda Maverick. And I like a lot of other people, but those are the guys that I feel strongly enough to bet on, and that's 6 people. So will we make a 6-person pod bet just for UFC 269? I don't know. I don't think so. I will tell you that if we get our shit together early enough, we would like to add Jose Aldo to that pod bet because we are all huge fans of Jose Aldo since he stepped down to bantamweight, and I think adding him to the pod bet will be, I don't know about necessary, but it'll definitely be worth it if he wins, which we do believe he'll win because Jose Aldo is the underdog. It's very close to even odds, but Jose Aldo is the underdog in his fight against Rob Font. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we do get back, I'm going to talk a little bit about the fight night coming up this weekend. main evented by Rob Font and Jose Aldo. Go check out MMA Complete Podcast on YouTube. Check out our Twitter @complete_MMA. Go follow Fans Only Sports on all of their social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. And stay tuned. We do this every Thursday night, and we're going to be doing live reactions for UFC 269 next weekend, December 11th, wherever you're watching this now. All right, we're back. So, coming up this weekend, fight night between Rob Font and Jose Aldo. There's three really big fights on this card, but there is pretty exciting fights throughout the entire thing. So I'm going to just highlight the top three. I'm going to go from the bottom of the card to the top so I can work my way to Aldo versus Font being last because it's the one I have the most to talk about. So the first fight we're going to talk about is a light heavyweight bout between Jimmy Crute and Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill coming off a very disappointing loss to Paul Craig, in which Jamal Hill was undefeated and ended up getting his shoulder either dislocated or separated. And in a fight where Paul Craig looked outstanding, Jamal Hill was good on the ground until it went to the bottom, where Paul Craig really pulled him into the bottom. And we know that Paul Craig has outstanding jiu-jitsu, and when it gets to the ground, Paul Craig is very likely to end it sooner than later, which is exactly what he did. You got Jamal Hill in an arm bar, and within like 10 seconds, he fucked up Hill's shoulder, and that was it. But Jamal Hill has a lot more to show. I think that Jamal Hill is a very great striker. Super young. He is inexperienced. And he will be taking on another inexperienced guy, Jimmy Crute. Jimmy Crute had his opportunity to ascend the ladders when he fought Anthony Smith. But Anthony Smith ended up fucking up Jimmy Crute's leg. Jimmy Crute wasn't even able to walk in between rounds, and so the referee had to stop the fight. Jimmy Crute, both of these guys are really great prospects, or they were prospects before they really hit the limelight, which they are in the top 15, so they're not really prospects anymore. But Jimmy Crute versus Jamal Hill promises to be a stand-up bout between two heavy hitters and two creative strikers. If these guys weren't light heavyweight, I would say that this fight's going to go the distance because they're both point strikers. They're not really knockout strikers. However, I do think with the amount of output that we do see between both of them and the fact that they are 205, this fight will get finished early. Whether it gets finished in the second or the first round, I can't really say. But nonetheless, I think Jimmy Crute will win. Jimmy Crute is a little bit... He has more experience. Jimmy Crute has been able to beat the likes of Modestas Bukauskas and Michael Alexashuk before he fought Anthony Smith. And Anthony Smith is like number 4 contender in the world right now. So that experience alone puts him in a much better spot, even though he did lose after only one round to Anthony Smith. Whereas Jamal Hill, he lost to Paul Craig. That's a good loss to have. Paul Craig, especially nowadays where Paul Craig is ascending the ladders. However, Jamal Hill did show a huge weakness in his game, he was pulled down by Paul Craig into his guard and then submitted right away. And that shows that Jamal Hill really needs to work on his, I don't want to say takedown defense, but he needs to work on his ground awareness. And then he obviously needs to work on his jiu-jitsu. And, Jimmy Crute hasn't had that problem on the ground. He was taken down by Anthony Smith, but he did really well on a fucked up leg, which shows that he does have a good amount of wrestling prowess. And I think that while these guys might be even striking, I would give a slight advantage to Jimmy Crute, and then I would say Jimmy Crute's better on the ground. So I think that Jimmy Crute will win this fight. The over-under is 1.5. I'm going to go ahead and say over. And again, a really interesting fight that I do think will make a lot of people interested in both of these guys. I think that whoever wins this fight could possibly go up to like number 12. Right now, Jimmy Crute is the number 13 ranked contender. Jamal Hill, number 14. Paul Craig is at the 11 spot, so I don't think either of them go above him. But when you look at the rest of the rankings, you got Ryan Spann, you got Johnny Walker. I think that they could easily go above them. The next fight we're going to be talking about on the fight night coming up this weekend is Brad Riddell versus Rafael Fiziev. Now, I have been taking a lot of interest in UFC divisions and prospects, names that we might not have heard that much of throughout the year, but names that have been doing very well and names that have kind of slid under the radar. And prospects, namely. You've heard me mention that word several times throughout this podcast, but prospects intrigue me because prospects are the future, Before Israel Adesanya was the middleweight champion of the world, he was a prospect in the UFC. Granted, he had a tremendous kickboxing career before that. You had guys like Volkanovski who were really great prospects. So I'm always maybe I shouldn't say always, but as of late, I've been really interested to see who the best prospects are. Brad Riddell and Rafael Fiziev are both, I would say, two of the top 5 prospects in the UFC right now. And they're currently both in the 10 to 15 range of the lightweight rankings. And they're going to be fighting each other. So this fight is super interesting to me. So Rafael Fiziev is more of a boxer. Brad Riddell is more of a wrestler. However, they're both very well-rounded. They're both pretty young, 26, 28. And this fight, I couldn't tell you what the hell is going to happen because, I think it's going to go to a decision. I could say that. I think Rafael Fiziev is going to land a bomb. I think Brad Riddell is going to get a couple takedowns. But shit, dude, I couldn't tell you who's going to win. I will tell you this. Brad Riddell is on a 4-fight win streak ever since getting to the UFC. He's 4-0. Rafael Fiziev is 4-fight win streak, and he is 4 of 5 in his 5 fights in the UFC. So both guys on a 4-fight win streak. Brad Riddell last beating Drew Dober. Rafael Fiziev last beating Bobby Green and Renato Moicano. So they have both had some experience in the UFC. I would say between those 3 wins, Drew Dober is the most talented. Therefore, Brad Riddell has the biggest fight. He also fought Jamie Malarkey for his first fight in his career. Jamie Malarkey's no slouch. I'm going to give it to Brad Riddell. I think Brad Riddell is the better prospect between the two. Undefeated in the UFC. I think his wrestling background is going to help him out a lot. If this goes to a decision, we see a lot of wrestlers that get takedowns and are able to control the pace of the fight, win. But Rafael Fiziev, always dangerous. He can put your lights out, and this fight's going to carry a lot of interest in my in my total interest of this upcoming fight night. I think that this fight night is weirdly competitive in the top 3 fights. I think all 3 of these fights could have made it to the UFC 269 card, but for some reason or another, they weren't. And then we got the main event. We got the main event between Jose Aldo and Rob Font. So Aldo on a 2-fight win streak. He is 2 of 4 since he went down to bantamweight. His first fight at bantamweight was a very controversial loss to Marlon Moraes, in which everybody, including Dana White, said that Jose Aldo should have won. Therefore, in my eyes, the only real loss that he has at bantamweight is against Petr Yan, who is also, again, in my eyes, the best bantamweight in the world, and in the eyes of a lot of people. And those were his first 2 fights, and now that he's gotten more acclimated to it, he's on a 2-fight win streak. He's beaten Pedro Munoz and Marlon Vera, 2 very, very dangerous guys, stand up. And now he's fighting Rob Font. Rob Font, who just decimated Cody Garbrandt through 5 rounds, who also lost to Marlon Moraes recently, but doesn't have the caliber and the experience that someone like Jose Aldo has. And to be honest with you, not a whole lot of people in the UFC has the experience that Jose Aldo has. He's been a championship level fighter or a champion pretty much his entire career for at least 14 years. So Jose Aldo is my pick for this fight. I know he's the pick of a lot of people here. Us at MMA Complete love Jose Aldo since he went down to bantamweight. His striking, which was already fantastic at featherweight, has morphed into new levels of his swiftness. His leg kicks are brutal, and he could have put out Pedro Munoz a couple times Pedro Munoz a couple times in their fight earlier this year. I think Jose Aldo is, I think Jose Aldo is a future title challenger for, I think, Petr Yan, because I think Petr Yan will either beat Aljamain Sterling or Aljamain Sterling will vacate the title for right around the time that Jose Aldo will challenge for the fight. That's no disrespect to Rob Font either. Rob Font is really good. He's a really good wrestler too. He can strike with the best of them, super quick, brutalized Cody Garbrandt like we really have never seen before in a fight that arguably you could say made Cody want to go down to fucking flyweight. Yeah, man, I mean, no disrespect to Rob Font because he is a top 4 fighter in this division, but Jose Aldo's the man, and I think that he wants another title shot after not having, his last time fighting in a championship fight was his 13-second knockout against Conor McGregor when he got knocked out, and I think he wants another shot at a belt, and I think he's going to get it very soon. And that's the big fights coming up for this weekend. This weekend's fight night really should be a very good fight night, and I'm excited for it. And I know a lot of people out there are too. It's crazy. These 3 fights are going to be, like I said earlier, some of the 3 fights that we could have seen at UFC 269. But kudos to the UFC for spacing it out, for giving us 2 weeks, really, of really interesting fights. And then we do have December 18th, the fight night after UFC 269, where we have Derek Lewis versus Chris Daukaus, in a fight that I think will have a knockout in the first round. Chris Daukaus the favorite, but I'm leaning towards Derek Lewis because Derek Lewis has the knockout power of anybody in the world. And big rep in Derek Lewis. I know he looked awful in his last fight against Cyril Gane, but Cyril Gane is so well-rounded and he's so fucking good that Derek Lewis just couldn't stand a chance. And he looked off to start the fight. He looked like he was intimidated before the fight started, which I don't think he will be against Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus coming off a very big win against Shamil Abdurakhimov. Chris Daukaus has the tools, man. Chris Daukaus could totally knock out Derek Lewis, and I think this will be a knockout in the first round. I say Derek Lewis will win, but that's only slightly, in my opinion. In the co-main event of that fight, we have Stephen Thompson versus Bilal Muhammad in a fight that I think Stephen Thompson will win. I think Stephen Thompson is looking to bounce back after his loss to Gilbert Burns. Obviously, he's looking to bounce back. But Stephen Thompson, his versatility, striking with his legs and with his hands are really, like, his creativity, his kickboxing prowess might be unmatched, besides maybe a Yair Rodriguez or an Israel Adesanya. His ability to kickbox is really top 5 in the UFC. And then you got a guy like Bilal Muhammad, who in his last fight against Damian Maia really impressed me by his takedown defense. You know, Damian Maia was like 1 for 19 on takedowns, which you don't see from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt like Damian Maia. But Stephen Thompson's not going to try to take him down. So when you have to go toe-to-toe with someone face-to-face striking, Bilal Muhammad is a really good striker, but I don't think he matches up with Stephen Thompson. So I got Stephen Thompson in that. You also have Cub Swanson versus Darren Elkins, the comeback kid, Darren Elkins, and the old, almost getting to be washed out, Cub Swanson, who last we saw got knocked out by a liver kick by Giga Chikadze. I like Darren Elkins in that. And Ricky Simon versus Rafael Assunção. Rafael Assunção we haven't seen since he got knocked out by Cody Garbrandt. And Assunção trying to make one last push, but I think that Ricky Simon has the edge in his youth and in his striking. I think Rafael Assunção is about done. I like Ricky Simon in that fight. So that is the next 3 cards. This weekend, next weekend's pay-per-view, and the weekend after that. And I think they're all really good fight nights and pay-per-views. I think the UFC is treating us to great fights to end out the year. Like I said, I think there's going to be about a month lull after the Lewis Dawkins fight. I don't think we're going to see a fight night until January 15th, which is between Giga Chikadze and Calvin Kattar, which promises to be a banger, and we're going to talk about that more as it comes up soon. We have UFC 270, which will be January 22nd, Austin's birthday. That's between Francis Ngannou and Cyril Gane. Co-main event, Moreno versus Figueiredo 3. Cannonier Brunson also on that card. A bunch of good fights are going to be on that card. A great way to start the year. So the UFC just putting out banger after banger after banger, man. We're so lucky to be following this sport right now. And we're so lucky to be in such a good place to make some money off of it. So if you want to know what we're going to do in our, I'm going to say expert opinion, because we're kind of getting there. We've been doing it for so long that we're kind of getting there. Stay tuned for the last, 20 minutes of the podcast, where we're going to kind of be going over what we think is good for the pod bet. And we're going to give you a little bit extra into what's going to be coming on the show for the next couple weeks. So check out our Twitter, @complete_MMA. Go follow us on our YouTube page, MMA Complete Podcast. And go follow Fans Only Sports on their social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We'll be right back for the third part of our show. All right, we're back. Austin's joined the studio.
I'm back.
I went over the first three the next three fight cards already, but I can kind of go over the highlights just to talk about the things that I really want to go over. I have said already that I think I want to start the talkings of the pod bet for UFC 269.
Yep.
UFC 269 next week. 2 days from now, Rob Font versus Jose Aldo.
Oh, yeah. Jose Aldo.
Yeah. Yep. Jose Aldo.
Underdog, but I think
He's the underdog. Isn't that crazy?
his last fight, I think he it's coming off one of his best performances. Not best performance. Yes.
It was a good performance.
Yeah, I mean, he's
Pedro
had some great performances in his career.
Right.
Was pound for pound the best in the UFC at one point. I think this is his second career jumpstart, kind of like we just saw in the heavyweight division with
Derek Lewis.
No, not heavyweight division. I'm sorry, light heavyweight division. That guy won.
Oh, Teixeira.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Jose Aldo in this new division, he can make a name for himself. Like first couple fights, kind of rusty in it, but.
Mm-hmm. But he's fighting, he fought Marlon Moraes in a fight that everybody, including Dana White, said that Aldo won, but they gave it to Moraes. And then you fought Piotr Jan, and you got stopped in the fourth, that's a good loss to have. And then you've won 2 straight. So I like Jose Aldo too. And I said if we can get our shit together early enough, we can add Jose Aldo to the pod bet. So if you want to take a look at this, these fights right here are UFC 269. Oliveira Poirier, Nunes Pena, Neil Ponzinibbio, Cara France Garbrandt, Paiva O'Malley, Emma Ige, Munoz Cruz, Sakai Tuivasa, Wright Silva, Andre Muniz Anders, Miranda Maverick, Alex Perez versus your boy Matt Schnell, Ryan Hall versus Derek Minner. I got a couple names that I really like. I don't want to put 7 people on a pod bet. But I got a lot of names. For the record, I'm picking Alex Perez to beat Matt Schnell. I like Alex Perez a lot.
No, yeah, but Matt Schnell, yeah. I mean, he's not really my boy. I mean, I
know. I think you had talked about him against one fight, maybe against
Perez. Yeah. Jordan Wright. I mean, he's been on a 4-fight win streak. Is this
one
heavyweight
win streak? Jordan Wright is middleweight.
Middleweight. Okay.
So Jordan Wright is 12-1. He got to the UFC at 11-0.
Yeah.
He lost a fight against Joaquin Buckley, the guy who had the knockout of the year last year.
Yeah.
And then he won his next fight.
That was a crazy
And he's fighting a guy, Bruno Silva, who's 12-5. He's on a 2-fight win streak. But Jordan Wright is that for odds.
Yeah.
So, that's at least a sprinkle.
Are you sure this ain't heavyweight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. No,
I'm pretty fucking sure.
Because I always remembered him fighting at heavyweight.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yep, Jordan Wright is middleweight.
Okay.
I like Nunes, obviously. I like Jeff Neal. Right. I like Jeff Neal. I like Cody Garbrandt.
Is it? Okay.
Is it worth it? Nunes is not as much of a favorite as she has been in the last couple fights.
That's what I mean.
It's less than 4 figures.
That's what I mean.
Right.
Is it worth it still?
Maybe it depends on how many people you put on the pod bet. Because if we're doing a 4-person pod bet with Nunes, no, it's not. But if we're putting a 6-person pod bet, 7 maybe, you're gonna get better return for it. I don't know what we want to do though, because if we're gonna add Aldo, we got to figure it out in the next 2 days.
Oh man, I don't know. I mean,
I like Tai Tuivasa versus Augusto Sakai too.
I mean, the Aldo is kind of a risky one. I ain't gonna front, but I do think he's gonna win. Is it a pod bet supposed to be
the locks?
The locks of the locks. So you
don't think Aldo's a lock? Again, it's a competitive fight.
Rob Font's a
motherfucker.
Rob Font's gonna reach, and he proved he's got good defense. So I mean,
he picked apart Cody Garbrandt like we maybe have never seen before. Aldo is something special, though.
Aldo's something special.
All right, so if you want to go locks, for me, locks is Amanda Nunes, Cody Garbrandt,
Neil. Yeah, I like that.
Andre Muniz, Miranda Maverick.
Yeah, I like that. I like Muniz, and I like Tuivasa.
I would throw Aldo in my locks.
Miranda Maverick, meh.
Listen,
It's
Miranda Maverick had a
different.
bad rap in her last fight.
Hey, man. Girls are tough.
Mm-hmm.
Girls are tough to judge.
They are. They don't have the over-unders yet for 269 except for the main event and co-main event.
Okay, so let's just see. What did you put the pod bet together? Did you see what the total number would be?
No, I haven't.
No.
I still don't have that fucking app. I can't put the app together. Like I can't figure out how to add it. I just go online to it.
Yeah. Because that means something to me with the pod bet. Because I mean, Miranda Matt. Who's she facing? Who is that?
Erin Blanchfield.
Okay. Who is that?
I know as much about her as you do.
Okay. Well, that means something. She might be up and coming. So if we put Jose Aldo.
Underdog.
Yeah. You see Poirier slid down a little, but then he climbed back up.
Erin Blanchfield,
Nunes
7-1, and she's 1-0 in the UFC.
You like Geoff? You like Neil? Because
I like Neil, but that's not a lock for me.
It's not a lock. Okay.
I just don't think Ponzinibbio is really that great.
Sean O'Malley's fighting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a lock.
I don't know.
It's a lock.
I don't know if it is. Holly and Paiva's really good, and he's making his way from flyweight to bantamweight, which I like fighters that go up a division.
Dan Ige's fighting too. Wow.
Dan Ige's fighting Josh Emmett. Dan Ige is a pretty big underdog.
Ryan Hall's fighting in this
He's
too.
fighting
Wow.
Derek Minner.
Well, I'm definitely betting on Derek Minner.
I like Ryan Hall.
Dude, what did he do last time?
He fought Ilia Topuria, and Ilia Topuria is like the best prospect in UFC. He's now in the top 15 of the featherweight division. So that was just a bad fight for Ryan Hall. He got caught.
Dude, I don't know. I'm going to go with Derek Minner. That's just me. But, all right, so who else?
Andre Muniz. I don't think he was on the app.
He's not on here.
Versus Eric Anders.
No.
Tai Tuivasa versus Augusto Sakai. I don't think he was on there either.
What the frick is going on?
Pedro Munoz versus Dominic Cruz.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a good fight.
I like Pedro Munoz.
Me too. And then Poirier versus Oliveira.
Clay Guida's fighting. Wow.
Yeah, Guida's fighting Leandro Santos this weekend.
Brendan Allen too.
Brendan Allen versus Chris Curtis, the guy from WEI.
Yeah. Brendan Allen should win that.
Yeah. Jimmy Crute versus Jamal Hill is also this weekend. That's a really good fight.
I like Jimmy Crute.
I like Jimmy Crute too. Jamal Hill's a motherfucker though. He's the guy that got armbarred by Paul Craig.
Yeah, I still got Jimmy Crute.
Yeah, I do too. Brad Riddell versus Rafael Fiziev is super interesting coming up this weekend. The co-main event of this weekend's fight night. I got Brad Riddell, but again, two of the biggest prospects in the lightweight division.
Interesting. Did you talk about my birthday?
I haven't talked about that pay-per-view much. I kind of just glanced over it.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Before we get into that, can I tell you about the fight night before your birthday? January 15th. Main event is the only fight that has gotten announced.
Wow.
But it's Giga Chikadze.
Oh, good one.
Versus Calvin Kattar.
I got
Chikadze.
Yeah.
I think Chikadze is fucking really good, dude. Yeah. I think he is so good. Listen, Calvin Kattar is really great. I think his last loss against Max Holloway made him look bad. I mean, he did look bad. I think he has a better fight against Max Holloway like 3 out of 5 times. You know, Max Holloway is just one of the best in the world. But Giga Chikadze is getting better every single fight, dude. And he is a world-class kickboxer. We saw him knock a guy out, like Cub Swanson, a veteran, by a liver kick. Like, what?
Yeah.
I like Chikadze in that. And
Chikadze. I like his style. He's fast. Him and Max Holloway is a matchup. A fucking matchup.
Yeah, that is really. I think Max beats him because Max's boxing's better. Chikadze's kicks are way better, but Max just puts pace on.
If you're gonna bet the deed on Max, that's the one to do it on. That's the one to do it on.
Because it wouldn't be that favorite. I think the next fight we see from Max is a title shot against Volkanovski, though. I think they got to give it to him after the performances he had against Qatar and Rodriguez just recently. I think you got to give it to Volk. And who else are you going to have challenge for the title in that division? You going to give it to Chan Sung Jung? No. Brian
Korean
Ortega?
Zombie?
He had a great fight against Volkanovski, but he's going to need
another
another win.
Brian Ortega's, he needs to kind of...
Giga Chikadze, if he can rack up 2 more
good
wins.
for that division, though.
Yeah, he is. Brian Ortega's...
Like, who's he losing to? Like,
He's only, in his career, he's only lost to Holloway and Volkanovski. That's it. If Chikadze
and he almost beat
more...
Volkanovski. How didn't he tap him out, bro? That
Twice.
was so crazy.
Twice.
Dude, that triangle was so crazy.
I'm just saying, I'm not going to ruin it just yet, but December 23rd, we're doing superlatives. Volkanovski Ortega is going to get mentioned in that superlatives. Just saying. That was a ridiculous fight. We've had some crazy pay-per-views in a row, dude.
Dude, Max Holloway's got the fight of the year in my eyes, bro.
Against Qatar?
I mean, we can talk... Yeah, we don't have to talk about it.
Okay.
But no, there's... We'll talk about it.
I'm going to take
it when the time comes.
Don't spoil it, but there's my list.
Okay.
Don't spoil it.
You got that at number 1. It's tough, bro. I mean, that number 9.
I thought this fight was better than this fight.
Well, you didn't watch that fight.
Yeah, but I've rewatched it.
Did you?
Yeah.
You really did?
Yeah.
It was a good fucking fight. I mean, it was, if you didn't...
It was just too one-sided for me. Anyway, let's get back to the fights coming up. So, I got to ask you, because we've kind of beat around the bush of it. We obviously didn't have a podcast last week. Happy Thanksgiving. Who you got, Dustin Poirier or Charles Oliveira?
Poirier, because I bet against him twice, and I've learned my lesson.
Over-under's 1.5.
Over.
Over-under 3.5. Alternate rounds. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that is worth a sprinkle.
No, but that... Yeah, but what's that for? Oh, that's for the over.
I don't know if it's going to go to a decision.
No.
I don't think it will, but I just saw that. I was like, I got to write that down.
That might be worth the sprinkle.
Poirier Oliveira, man. I got a whole bunch of superlatives planned. Yeah. One of them includes Fighter of the Year. And I think both of these guys have a claim for Fighter of the Year. Oof. That's going to be a really, really interesting fight. I like Poirier. I think Poirier's more well-rounded, although I do think Charles Oliveira showed me a lot in his striking against Mike Chandler. But, yeah, I don't know. I like Poirier just by the skin of my teeth.
What's making me less confident is how not confident you are in him.
Poirier?
Yeah. Because you've been very confident in him the past couple times. But you're also a non-believer. Well, not a non-believer in Conor McGregor, but... Dude, Conor McGregor is going to be set for a comeback, dude. Like, people don't think... he has power, dude.
Listen, I think Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler is the next fight to make.
Conor needs to get better jiu-jitsu, man. And you can't teach that in a year, 2 years, 3 years.
It's hilarious that you say that. I kind of agree with you, but here's 2 points to kind of offset that. Like, I totally agree with you. He needs to learn his jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
1, he did good against Khabib. And that's more wrestling, I get it.
Yeah.
But, like, he stuffed takedowns from Khabib. And he was able to beat around against Khabib by, like, keeping him off of him. And then 2, both fights against Poirier didn't go to the ground. It's interesting. Poirier, you don't really think of as a wrestler. You think of him as a brawler. That's how I think of him.
Yeah.
And so when you fight a guy like Conor McGregor, you're not going to think about going to the ground.
Poirier fucking loves Conor McGregor, man. He's made him so much money.
That's what I said at the beginning of the show.
People got to realize, after their careers are over, these people are going to make a lot of money if they work together.
Right.
It's
Poirier could have challenged for the title in May.
podcasts they could make, bro.
Right.
It's insane.
Just get all the guys.
Not under contract for the UFC.
I don't know if like Khabib and McGregor will ever work together, but like McGregor,
no, they'll never work.
Poirier,
together. And that's on Khabib.
Some like Cerrone, Gaethje.
McGregor would work with Khabib, but Khabib would not work with McGregor.
Yeah, I completely. I think that's right. What do you think about like a Makhachev McGregor fight? I mean, we all know wins. How the hell that's gonna happen.
Wins.
But do you think that like ever like McGregor calls him out? I don't think McGregor ever calls him out.
And I think that's a big money fight.
Yeah, I do too.
And it is.
Makhachev versus Beneil Dariush set for February 26th.
Yeah, that's a good fight too. I think it's good
matchup. Good style
matchup.
I like Makhachev.
Beneil Dariush's weight with his wrestling play in effect because he weighs in heavy. It's
crazy, right? Like Dariush does not look 155.
He looks like 190.
Makhachev looks small for 155, and Dariush looks big for 155.
I know.
Makhachev's a little taller than Dariush. Dariush is honestly, he's only like 5'9".
I'm gonna bet on. Not bet. I'm gonna pick Makhachev to win. Because I think his style's better. I think
Dariush might be the only person in that division that can match Makhachev's wrestling.
Yeah.
But Makhachev has better jiu-jitsu. He has better submissions.
Yeah.
And he's able to take a limb. Like what we just saw against Dan Hooker, he got him into Kimura in like 2 minutes. That's so fucking impressive.
It is, dude. It is. And I think, dude, we can't forget about Tony Ferguson either. Like, I know it's...
I know. Tony Ferguson, everybody thinks is washed up, but his last 3 losses are against Gaethje, Oliveira, and Dariush, who are, the 3 of the top 4 ranked lightweights in the world?
Yeah, but do you think Dana White does that on purpose to keep fighters interested? Because look at Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley's only loss is against Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is what? He was non-ranked when he fought him. Now he's number top 10. So that makes Sean O'Malley, that makes his loss look good.
Right. 100%.
So I kind of think he does it on purpose, but I don't know.
I don't know if it's on purpose, but I think it just makes sense. Like O'Malley, Vera wasn't anybody before he fought O'Malley.
Yeah.
And now you see what he's capable of and shit.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think... Yeah, who does Tony fight, man? Like, fuck, like...
Who does Tony fight?
He could fight anybody. For a guy that's lost...
Tony Ferg, Dan Hooker?
Yeah, for a guy that's lost...
Gregor Gillespie would be a good fight.
3 fights in a row. Like, he's in a...
Dude, Conor would be a good fight for him, too.
Yeah, he deserves it for not getting the title shot, too. Conor don't want that fight, though.
I think, I don't know.
That would be a great shit talk.
That would be a great shit talk.
That's
Tony Ferg versus Conor.
And it would get Tony's name out there more. Like, people would like Tony, but it would be at the end of his career.
Like, the MMA diehards love Tony, but the casuals don't really know Tony like that. Yeah. All right. It's 8 o'clock. That's about wrapping it up. Anything else you kind of want to get out there? You mentioned it real quick earlier, but January 22nd is Ngannou versus Gane, and Moreno versus Figueiredo 3. That'll be a great card. You think you're coming for that? It's your birthday. I didn't know.
Maybe, probably. It's a Saturday, so yeah, probably. I'm probably gonna be drunk, and yeah, it's gonna. That's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You taking that day off of work to stream?
Yes, absolutely. My birthday is Friday after that.
Yeah,
so
our birthdays landed on great days, Friday and Saturday. I looked yesterday and I was like, "Oh shit, Saturday!
Yeah.
Damn."
Right, that's fucking.
Colt Pats coming up.
Colt Pats. That's gonna be on a Saturday now. We got moved to a Saturday, 8 o'clock. Under the lights, it'll be a primetime game because it's Saturday.
It's so sick. Indoor. Sick. Best stadium, voted best stadium in the NFL.
We are front row, midfield on the fucking 50-yard line in the side that the camera points to.
We're at the 50-yard line?
Oh, yeah. No, we are top. Well, there's only 2 decks.
Yeah.
It's the bottom and the top. But we are the front row at the 50-yard line.
At the top.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Top's better than the bottom because you can see the whole field. You can see everything happen. You get the best view. And you can scream. You can scream whatever you want.
Dude, the tickets were dirt cheap. I don't know how the fuck it was like $72 a ticket. What the fuck? Yeah. Dude, $72 a ticket at Gillette wouldn't even get you like nosebleeds. Literally.
I know it's like $300 minimum, $200. Yo, did you see? I know we're getting way off track, but did you see Mac Jones' stats compared to Tom Brady's?
Mac Jones has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
I will be the first guy to admit how wrong I was. I was severely.
I don't think I was wrong about Mac Jones. Wrong. I just thought he would be this next year. I thought it would take him a year.
I was severely.
And it really only took him 2 months.
Severely wrong. I did not.
We can keep talking about this, but I'm going to end this real quick.
Yeah.
All right. MMA Complete Podcast 74 in the books. Make sure you check out UFC 269 live reactions next week. Check us out on our YouTube page, MMA Complete Podcast, and our Twitter @complete_MMA. Go follow Fans Only Sports on their Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter pages. Every Thursday night at 7 p.m. we're going to be doing this, so check us out. Wherever you're watching this now, including all the social medias I just put out there, is where you can find us next week for UFC 269. And then December 23rd, we're doing our second annual Superlatives, MMA Complete Superlatives. And December 30th, we're going to be revising our divisional rankings and including the pound for pound. So you want to stay tuned. We are probably going to be missing the podcast for the 16th when we go up to Indy. So we really only got one more podcast before the Superlatives, which is going to be good because we're going to be able to talk about 269 and all that. Thank everybody for tuning in. We're out of here.
Peace.
This is going to be some good fights coming up.
I know.
This is going to be good. We're going to make some money.